Okay, we'll make a start. Thank you very much, folks, for coming out tonight. It's fantastic we have a full house. I'd like to welcome our four speakers, Greg, Judy, Chris and Amy. I'd also like to welcome community groups who are here tonight, Coot Alliance, Warren North Rotary and the Victorian Forest Alliance. There's also a cat curfew petition for you to sign if you wish. It's terrific to have interest and support from Councillors Galt, Hollingsworth, Nolan, and maybe Mel Osborne-Smith might be here too. I know there are at least two other events on in Boroondara tonight, and the Mayor Sophie Tawney is an apology. My name is Ray Peck, and the Lighter Footprints Forest Working Group is hosting this event for you tonight. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who traditional owners of this land and pay my respects to their elders past and present. This slide from the Boroondara Reconciliation Strategy shows the Wurundjeri country and the circle locates where we are. While many trees have been lost since settlement, some still stand. There are in fact 10 known scar trees, for example, within Boroondara along Boroondara, the Yarra River. Next to the river is the Wurundjeri Way. Hands up if you walked it. Fantastic. About 20 hands went up there. The guided walk last week along Wurundjeri Way was fully booked. The guided walk on Friday is also fully booked. The Forest Working Group has two main interests: protecting native forests and protecting and growing Boroondara's urban forest. We'd love you to join our working group. While logging in Victoria has been officially stopped, sadly it continues in other guises. For example, our native forests are still being harmed by a massive prescribed burning program, several times larger than what has been logged in the last decade. Victorian Forest Alliance President Sue Lewis and Secretary Nick Fox are here tonight up in the back corner. Thank you very much for coming. And they can tell you a lot more about their program. Importantly, Waterton Environment has a court case against the Victorian Government for Forest Fire Management Victoria's destruction of hollow-bearing trees in state and national parks. Because they have hollows, there's a chimney effect, magnifying the fire, and a high proportion of them are killed. Nick can answer your questions. They need our support. They have a fundraiser on to help fund the cost of that court case. That's one simple action that you could take tonight if you go over and see Nick. Boroondara has over 1,000 trees that have been designated as significant. They're outstanding trees because of their impressive size, age, rarity, ecological value, or cultural and historical significance. We're lucky, aren't we, to live in Boroondara? Significant trees can be on private property or public land, and it's up to the community to nominate them. Oops. Last year, the Forest Working Group was successful with the support of Chris Spencer, in having 44 new significant trees added to the register. Thank you. Here are two, Chris, new ones that we've nominated this year. A spotted gun on the left at number 9 Lyndhurst Crescent in Hawthorn, and quite like this one because it's a cluster of 5 lemon-scented guns also in Hawthorn. Fantastic outcome supported by Chris's team. We encourage you to do the same and help us nominate them. We believe there are several hundred more trees in Burnley that will qualify as significant. We just have to nominate them. Another action that you could take when you're out walking, take a photo of the tree and go to the website. Since our last Urban Trees event 3 years ago, much has happened, hasn't it? On the downside, climate change has worsened. Eastlink, another development, including record knockdowns and illegal tree removals, have removed thousands of trees in Boroondara. And the Victorian Government has launched activity centres. The tree canopy has declined. On the upside, Boroondara has launched new tree and biodiversity strategies and elected a far more environmentally aware council. The budget for trees has been substantially increased. Friends and community groups are doing their bit. Lighter Footprints is very grateful to our presenters who have volunteered their time tonight to talk to us. Greg, Judy and Chris presented in 2022. It's great to have them back. We're really ready to come back. And we're delighted to welcome you for the first time. Thank you. As they speak, put any questions you have into the Slido. The details how to do it are on the agenda on your seat. There's a QR code and there's a Slido number that you have to enter when you use the QR code to go to the Slido page. Tonight's presentation, at least in my mind, is structured a bit like a tree. Do I get a time ribbon as well? That's good. First, the big picture, think tree canopy. Then a tighter focus on Victoria, think branches. Then a specific focus on Boroondara, think trunk. Followed by a local biodiversity focus, think understory and everywhere around the tree. And lastly, you, the residents, who are you, with your myriads of questions? You're the roots, the fungi, the mitochondria, pretty sexy. So we've got one big tree going in this room. Our first speaker is Dr. Greg Moore. Greg, I think it's enough to describe him as a Melbourne tree legend. And in 2017, he was awarded an OAM for services to the environment, particularly arboriculture. He was the inaugural president of the Australian chapter of the International Society of Arboriculture. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, Greg will tell me. He's been a member of the National Trust of Victoria's Register of Significant Trees since 1988 and has chaired the committee since 1996. He's also been on the board of TreeNet since 1999, the board of Sustainable Garden Australia since 2002, and then the board of Green Australia for 24 years. Greg has also been a major speaker at conferences in Australia and overseas. He's also been a regular on Melbourne Radio, and I recently heard him speak about trees struck by lightning on Radio National. Please welcome Greg Moore.
You can do that. We're just putting on some hearing assistance. Okay, so I'm going to wrap through this pretty quickly. They've got their finger on the buzzer here, and so I could be sort of hooked off in any moment. So the first thing I wanted to sort of mention is that do you have an urban forest, and are we looking after one? Because the term forest actually means you've got to have 30% canopy cover. That's the definition that's been used in Australia for years. Most of the councils that we deal with don't have an urban forest because the canopy cover is nowhere near 30%. So what do they have? We all know what we mean by an urban forest, but maybe we should be a bit more realistic and say we've got an urban woodland. Because if you call it an urban forest, people will assume you've got one and you don't have to work to keep what you've got or to expand what you haven't got. So, language matters, and I think these things have to be sort of thought through. Those of you that were here last time will know that I asked a question, was 30% an arboricultural magic number? Well, these days I just come out and say, yes, it is. 30% is an arboricultural magic number. It's what a forest is. It's where you get most benefits from a tree canopy cover. If you have more canopy cover, you get more benefit, but the fact is you work really hard for not much extra. So you should be aiming for about 30% canopy cover. And for those of you that want to appeal to the economic rationalists in the community, when you get to about 30%, up until 30%, the property value goes up. You get to 30% and then it starts to fall. And what that tells you is that Australians want canopy on their properties. They just don't want much of it, which suggests to me that they're reasonably sensible about this. Now, in more recent times, and since the last time we were all here for a function like this, a new rule, a planning rule. Now, I've got to admit, you remember the line from Pirates of the Caribbean? It's not really a rule, but a guideline, more a guideline than a rule. So you want to remember that. And this one is the 330-300 rule. The 3 says a person should have the right to see 3 trees from their home. They should live where there's 30% canopy cover, and they should be within 300 metres of a green space. And I say a tree green space. Now, is it a rule? No. Is there some data to support it? Yes. How good is the data? It's pretty good for some aspects, not for others. But what I would say is that given that the battle that we're in over urban vegetation, it's not a bad rule for people to remember. And when you go from here, last time I asked you to remember 30%. This time I'm going to ask you to up the ante and remember 330-300. So that when someone says, what should we be doing about planning? You'll be able to answer 330-300. You didn't answer. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out is that the lifespans of trees in cities are pretty short. And it's interesting that the closer you get to the CBD or you get to a major shopping hub, the shorter the lifespan of the trees. And this is really sort of a significant issue because if we want to get the best out of our trees, we want them living for 50 to 100 years, 150, 200 even better, but we want to get the most we can out of them. And those of you in this audience know that there are major tree losses in the first 2 to 4 years when a tree is first planted. And quite often they're from sort of things that we can't entirely control. Might be pests, it might be vandalism, it might be droughts, those sorts of things. But there's another significant spike in tree deaths after about 30 years. And that 30 years is almost always due to human activity, i.e. digging through their roots, development, removals and so on. It's something that we can control. Longer lifespans can be achieved. So in Berlin, for example, all the trees were removed by the end of the Second World War. And if you go to Berlin now, there's lots and lots of trees. They're even aged, they're over 70 years, and they're doing well, okay? And they really preserve and protect them because they know what it was like when there weren't any significant trees. We haven't reached that stage yet. The other point I wanted to make is when you think about a tree being planted by your local council, and thank goodness plenty are, have you thought about how much carbon and resources have been spent on getting that tree into the ground? So it can take between 25 and 30 years before a tree becomes carbon positive. Now we all know that we want these trees to be sequestering carbon, But have you ever thought, well, we've planted that tree, it was grown in nursery, it's been put on a truck, there's a digger to dig a hole, all those sorts of things. And so lots and lots of energy and other resources, including carbon, have been utilised in getting that tree into that position. So if it dies in the first couple of years or after 30 years, that is an absolute tragedy. You need those trees to live longer. And if we don't do that, then these tree deaths are simply unsustainable environmentally and ludicrously uneconomical. We put all the resources into them, they haven't lasted, we've got none of the benefit. That's a lose, lose, lose big time. So you want to think about these things when you're talking about your urban trees. Now with urban trees, have you thought about how hard it is to actually define what you want in a good urban tree? I'm going to give you an example. We expect a lot of our urban trees. The council folk here know it. But have you thought, you've often thought to yourselves, and come on, you could admit it, that what the hell did they plant that tree for? Surely they knew better. Now, here's the deal. What do you want the tree to do? Firstly, you want them to be very tolerant of stresses, of environmental and climatic conditions, of different soil types, of restricted urban space. You want them to be tolerant of limb breakage and severance. We want them to establish and grow quickly. We want them tall but not too tall, straight and single trunk, tolerant of stresses, pest, disease, pollution and pruning, neat and tidy with soil surfaces and infrastructure unaltered by tree roots, free of shedding of flowers, fruits, foliage and bark, and maintenance free. We don't ask much, do we? Now you all know what that is. That's a post. You get one of. So we demand all of these things from our street trees and from our urban trees. And then when they have the indecency to drop a few leaves, put a bit of a mess on the footpath, we don't think of getting a broom and a rake. We think of getting the chainsaw and getting rid of the damn thing. It's completely unrealistic. Now, Adelaide is in some ways the canary in the coal mine for climate change. And the South Australian Parliament reviewed tree losses a couple of years ago. They were worried about temperatures exceeding 50 degrees in the city of Adelaide, which makes a city almost unlivable. They're worried because air conditioners don't work. They're not rated to work all that well after 45. They'd already lost 11% of their canopy cover in a decade, and they were losing 75,000 trees per year. You and I know that the situation for Melbourne and for Victoria as a whole is much worse than that. And so they decided they had to do something about it. They've taken it seriously. Our government, like that of Western Australia, for example, sleepwalking into climate change. They don't know what's going to hit them until it hits. And so my worry is with all of the canopy losses around our cities, and I don't just mean Melbourne, you can go to Ballarat, you can go to Bendigo, you can go to Geelong, same thing is happening there. You can go to Benalla or Euroa, and the citizens there are fighting to preserve trees. How bloody bizarre is that? Now, if we don't get this right, at some stage, there will be an Ash Wednesday-like heat wave, and I expect somewhere between 500 and 1,000 people to die. And I don't think I'm being catastrophic or exaggerating in my concern. The other thing I wanted to sort of point out while I've got the chance is you think that you've got an urban forest and you think it's evenly distributed amongst our citizens. Well, you know it's not. You know that to the north and the west there are far fewer trees. The urban heat island effect is much more significant, and this has an impact on the health of the locals, their lifespans, the quality of lives they lead, and of course the development and educational outcomes for their children. These are matters that are really matters of life and death for these sorts of people, and they have a huge impact on the way people live in those suburbs. So we know that the most impoverished parts of cities have the lowest canopy cover, the highest urban heat island effect. Now the paradox in this is obvious. The sectors of society that most need canopy cover and green space are those that have least of it and the least access to it. That is bizarre. How can that be seen as equitable in a society like those that we have in Victoria and across Melbourne? Now, I could go on about benefits forever, but I'm not, because I'm worried about the button and the timer. So I just wanted to put up major studies on the effects of greenness on women's health in North America, and you'll see here lower heatwave mortalities, longer lifespans, higher birth weights of babies, better educational outcomes for the women's children. You can see that if they go to hospital there for a shorter time, they use fewer prescription drugs. So these health benefits are enormous. And yet here we have the recurring theme of local government areas and local governments trying to maintain a canopy cover, and on private space, front and backyards, trees disappearing at an enormous rate. And governments that had reasonable canopy cover, over 30%, are now finding that they can't maintain that cover because of state government planning allowances that see a very, very dense development and the loss of canopy. So I just wanted to finish on this particular matter. Tree clearing for power lines. How the hell did Victoria become the worst in Australia in that regard? So you know that there's a campaign on this. There was a recommendation to change the canopy cover from a metre to 300 millimetres around trees, which would have transformed the Melbourne landscape, the rural landscape. And let me say, in fairness, the arborist from Boroondara, absolutely outstanding in her advocacy for those changes. Absolutely outstanding. And what did the state government do on the advice of Energy Safe Victoria? They rejected it, even though there was a unanimous recommendation. First time it ever happened. And of course, the first time it happened, Energy Safe Victoria said, oh, geez, these people are talking as one. We can't have that. We did not let that one get out into the public. Well, it is out in the public. And what we were recommending was a 300 millimetre clearance space around low voltage wires in low bushfire risk areas. What's the risk of a bushfire in a low bushfire risk area from low voltage electricity? Zero. None. How do we know that? They've been doing it that way in South Australia for over a decade. No bushfires, no more increases in outages. So it should have been adopted here, and this government did not do it. And it didn't do it, it says, for safety reasons. So here's the rub. It's putting arborists at risk. They're unnecessarily having to go up in those trees to prune those power lines for no good reason. If one of those arborists is hurt or killed, you'll hear plenty from me about it. And finally, don't you realise the benefits we could gain? A massive increase in canopy cover, $1 billion of extra benefits from canopy just from changing the line clearing regulations. They are no longer fit for purpose. Our government has missed a wonderful opportunity here, and I consider them to be negligent in not taking this step that is logical and sensible for the people of Victoria. Thank you all.
Wow, so much food for thought there from Greg Moore. Thanks, Greg. What were those three numbers? Happy? He's happy. I'm just going to skip through to Judy. So our next speaker is Dr. Judy Bush. Judy is a senior lecturer in urban planning at the University of Melbourne. Her research and teaching focus is on urban environmental policy and governance, urban nature-based solutions, biodiversity, and climate change perspectives, which is probably why we invited you, Judy. Judy's PhD is a lovely title, Cooling Cities with Green Space, Policy Perspectives. It was completed at Melbourne. And before that, Judy worked with alliances of local government on climate change action, community engagement, and waterways restoration in Melbourne. Her current research directions are cultural and sustainable landscapes and future cities. Please welcome Judy Bush.
Those of us with glasses.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the long bio. And thanks for the return invitation to come and talk to you all again. So I am talking about policy. Can policy protect urban trees? Well, you've heard Greg's views on that. I'm going to take a step back and look at the big picture. Before I do that, I'd like to acknowledge also that we're on Wurundjeri country, and I acknowledge the custodian of Wurundjeri people and their continuing care for country. So I'm talking about policy approaches, and as Ray said, I'm taking a metro-wide approach. So the key areas where trees are protected within policy for metro areas are across these policy domains. So urban forest, local laws, significant tree registers and planning scheme provisions. And already this evening you've heard a little bit about each of them. Urban forest strategies are probably more of a planning tool and a protection tool. Local laws can apply to public or private land, and they may include assessment decisions and decision criteria, but they're often differently constructed depending on which municipality you're in. Significant tree register, well, we heard about the Boroondara significant tree register. Many councils in the metro area have significant tree registers, but actually, again, they're applied and calculated differently. So some are based on tree circumference. Some of them recognise tree value based on their scientific, social, historic or aesthetic properties. So they can be different in different municipalities. And then I also wanted to talk about planning scheme provisions, which are usually regulatory. So out of the 31 metro councils, you can see here a range of different applications of these different policy types for protecting trees. So let's have a look in more detail at the planning scheme provisions, because you can see that 31 out of 31 councils have planning scheme provisions, but approaches really differ. So what are the planning schemes? Well, I know some of you are probably, can I say, massive planning nerds, whereas others probably don't really know, oh, there's planning schemes, I don't even know what's in them. So this is an overview of Victorian planning schemes and the sort of content or structure of Victorian planning schemes. So each municipality has its own planning scheme, but those planning schemes include both statewide and regional and local provisions. And they're all arranged in the same way, but many of them have provisions that are specific to the local area. Is that confusing or clear? I hope it's clear. And so you can see there, you know, clauses. Clause 2 is the municipal planning strategy across all Victorian councils. Clauses 10 to 19 are the planning policy framework. Clauses 32 to 37 are zones. Clauses 42 to 45 are overlays. Clauses 51 to 59 are particular provisions. So let's have a look in a bit more detail at the overlays. And I should have said I've included a QR code at the bottom of these slides if you want to go to the actual website that has this detail. So there are three main types of environmental overlays, as you can see here. And again, I've put the coverage across the different councils of those overlays. And you can actually see, if you can see this image, you can see that the overlays are applied in really different ways across the different councils, because you can see the municipality next to Boroondara has a lot more of that environmental significance overlay and vegetation protection overlay compared to Boroondara. Boroondara achieves its objectives in other ways. So it makes it hard when you're advocating for tree protections across the metro area because there's not standardisation of approach. So that's the overlays. Planning scheme provisions. So you might remember I said that was clauses 51 to 59, particular provisions. The provisions might specify all these things that I've listed on the screen. So they might specify retaining significant trees or vegetation. They might specify inclusion of space for tree planting, maximum proportion of the land occupied by built surfaces, and limitation on impervious surfaces. But there are a whole range of challenges and limitations in our planning schemes, not least that you can get to know the planning scheme very well, and then there will be amendments that will absolutely change all those rules. So there have been recent amendments related to multi-unit development and apartment development, activity centres, triggered in part by a focus on addressing the housing crisis. And so that means that I don't understand how the new provisions apply, but I have included a photo here that shows how they might be applied, and we can see that they include the possibility of taking out mature trees, which none of us want to see. Anyway, planning schemes, some of the other limitations are that they are, of course, only triggered by a development application. So they won't necessarily apply to removal of trees if they're in someone's backyard or front yard that doesn't require a planning permit. Of course, any planning rules requires enforcement, and that requires the municipality to actually invest in enforcement officers. There's also a difference in the planning scheme between mandatory, discretionary and voluntary, and some of you might have heard of City of Melbourne's C376 amendment, which related to environmentally sustainable development. That included a provision for the green factor tool, which I worked on in 2019. And it shows how long it takes to get planning changes, that I worked on that tool with consultants back in 2019, and it has just been approved for inclusion into the planning scheme last week. This is 2025, right? And the original conception was that it was going to be a mandatory tool, but it's based on the decision-making processes, it's become a discretionary tool, which is less powerful, obviously. Yeah, I've talked about those other things. So that's a very quick whiz through some of the policy approaches to tree retention. I also wanted to talk about policy integration, because I think that's another important area for all of us to think about, and an important area for local governments to consider as well. So I had an honours student last year who looked at the intersection of urban forest, active transport and health and wellbeing planning. So the impetus for this is we have urban forest planning that says we're going to plant an extra 3,000 trees in the municipality, for example. We then also have a completely separate active transport policy that might be in a completely separate bit of council that says we're going to increase our active transport networks, active transport being walking and cycling. Now, we know that during summer, if you want to get out there and walk somewhere or ride somewhere, then tree canopy is going to be potentially life-saving. So, are we aligning our planning for urban forest, thank you, with our planning for active transport? And what Crystal found was, yeah, no. So she looked only at City of Melbourne. City of Melbourne are doing a lot of work in both these areas, and we applaud them for that, but there's definitely work that can be done to align these better. And I would actually argue that we need to think about locating our shared paths, our active transport on currently shaded roads, rather than saying, oh, we need to plant trees along our bike paths. Let's put our bike paths where the trees already are and kick the cars off to the unshaded roads. Anyway, thank you, something to think about, and you can go to the journal article and also an article in The Conversation to read more about that if you want to have a look at that in detail. So in conclusion, because I know my time is almost up, recent article in The Age. The tree in Nicholas's front yard has cost him thousands, but council won't let him cut it down. And a quote that I've pulled out from this article. People often believe it's a good idea to have that local law, but then believe it shouldn't apply to them. And I was shocked and horrified to read in The Age today that the state government doesn't believe their canopy cover targets apply to them either, because they've just cut down 34 mature trees in Albert Park to make way for more Grand Prix infrastructure. So these are the challenges we're all facing. To conclude, I would say that the important thing is that we need to think about combining all those different types of policy mechanisms. It's not good enough just to rely on one. We need a suite of policy mechanisms, and we need to set and enforce those minimum standards, including 330, 300. We need to encourage and incentivise stewardship, and we need to actually have metro-wide controls and policy consistency so that we're not confused about which municipality are we, which planning scheme, provisions and so on. So my final slide that I probably don't have time to talk about, and for those of you who were here in 2022, you would have seen this slide, so maybe I don't need to talk about it, but just to reinforce that policy success needs to bring together a whole range of different factors, and those factors include things like leaders and champions, goals and targets, also positive narratives, community engagement, policy integration and so on. So I will finish there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk, and looking forward to the discussion after all the presentations.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Judy. It was a great coverage, I thought, of Victoria's planning laws, and I love the term that was on there, incentivise stewardship. Hang on to that one. The lack of planning where standardisation and there's discretion and that's allowed is indeed very worrying, isn't it? We haven't got our act together, have we? Our third speaker is Chris Spencer, Team Leader Arborist at the City of Boroondara. It's been a great pleasure getting to know Chris and working with him in recent years. Chris's passion for trees is contagious, and Boroondara is very lucky to have him as Team Leader Arborist. And so please welcome to the podium Chris Spencer.
I've got a big head. So, oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me at the back? A wave. Thank you. So I'm Chris Spencer. I didn't get my bio into Ray early enough, so a little quick snapshot about me. Been doing this for about 25 years, just over. Been at Boroondara for about 9 years. I work in the planning department as the team leader, urban planning forester, very fancy name for an arborist. I kind of consider myself a temporary custodian of your tree population. I take it really seriously. I have a very passionate team that I work with. Tonight, I would love to talk about a whole range of topics, but we're going to give you a quick snapshot of our tree canopy strategy, which we brought in middle of last year. So to understand our tree canopy strategy before we could develop the strategy, we need to know what we had. We'd done a study as part of our climate action plan, which identified what our canopy cover was. We did a multispectral analysis. That's a very fancy way of saying we did a flyover and took some pictures of our canopy to try and work out how much canopy we had and what it consisted of. We worked out that it had just under 25%. That was done in early 2022, so it was before North East Link removed a whole lot of trees. And so we felt like we went down in that time frame. One of the things that we understood is that there are really significant constraints on what we can do. We need more space for trees on private property. We need more space for trees on public land as well. We need more diversity. We need a resilient forest. And there's just increasing pressures, which Judy and Greg have talked about today on from development and from a range of other things, which I'll go across very briefly. So after doing that analysis, we worked out we could probably get to about 27% canopy cover. This is less than what we thought we could get to before. We think it's achievable. We would like to be more ambitious with that. We thought the 30% is what we wanted to get to as a target. We understand that that's the goal across broadly across the industry. But 27 is what we think we have space for. It's a minimum target that we're looking at. We're looking at doing another flyover on more canopy cover assessments in 2029 and 2033. And we're also looking at ways that we can do that more frequently. We're trying to work with Swinburne University and doing some things internally, trying to work out whether we can actually do our own canopy cover assessments annually or even more frequently to work out how our progress is going. So these are our three main targets in the tree canopy strategy: 27% canopy cover by 2034, 100% tree planting compliance. That's for any permit we issue for tree removal, or any planning permit that we issue for development that has tree planting requirements. And compliance is a tree's planted, either we take enforcement actions or the permit sometimes needs to be varied or amended. And we also know we need more diversity in our forest or in our tree population. It needs to be resilient. We need a breadth of different species, but that doesn't mean we're going to remove trees to get there. We will gradually attain that target. So I want to go through just a couple of quick wins we've had over the last year. So this was the tree canopy strategy came in the middle of last year. Greg's already touched on this. I've got two great segues from Greg and Judy today. So, and I really loved hearing your support for Elena, our coordinator of trees in our parks team, who's been heading the advocacy on the behalf of Council of Horticulture Victoria. So we're trying to get change to the regulations in relation to tree pruning around power lines. Our mayor, who's not here today, has met with the state minister. We're trying to gather support from other councils to enact a change, and we are of the understanding that later this year the new draft regulations will be out for public consultation. We're not sure when that's going to happen or how much time we'll get. So when we do find out, we'll let Lighter Footprints know and allow you to have a voice to help us to get those changes. And I think the slide that Greg showed before really shows the difference. I mean, I think you can all picture when the tree crews have gone through a street near you and the impact that has when that level of pruning goes ahead. Resourcing is really important for us to get there. My works with trees on private land. We've gotten funding, very thankfully, from councillors and community support last year to put on 2 landscape compliance officers. One of those does tree protection, looking at all of building sites for single dwellings and for multi-unit developments, making sure that trees are being protected. If you see something, let us know. We have officers that will go and inspect it and take actions. And another officer, which is brand new, is a tree planting officer. So a landscape compliance officer that is just following up on all the tree planting permits and the requirements of those permits, making sure those trees get planted and making sure those trees survive and are still there in years to come. In our parks and street team, we've got a project arborist now. So a project arborist is looking at making sure that all the work we do on our own land, so for all the developments we do in our streets and for any developments in parks, we've got our own project arborist making sure that those works are done appropriately to the trees on our land, on public land. Got another planting officer to help us get all the trees that we need to get in the ground. And we've got another reactive arborist, and the reactive arborists are the ones that go out and prune the trees when the community needs requests it, or picks up the branches and after storms. We're improving how we collect our data, trying to make it spatial, trying to collect it so it makes it's more usable for us in the future and can add more value to how we understand what's going on in the tree canopy. And trying to get collaborations and innovations. We're always looking at new ways to do things and trying to build relationships with different organisations to be able to achieve that. These are some of the kind of key things that we've done in the last year. On the right-hand side there, every year we issue around about 500 permits for tree removal. We haven't had a particularly good way or mechanism of following up on those permits. One of my staff members, Asar, has been working really hard to get compliance for all the years that we can. We have a statute of limitations of 3 years under our local law, so we can only really follow up on the trees that have been required to be planted over that time frame. And within 9 months of him being in this role, we've gone from 41% to 86% compliance for all the permits we issued in 2022, and we're at 98% for all the ones in 2023, and he's currently working on all the ones we issued last year. And so again, compliance is tree planted, we take enforcement actions, so infringements or prosecute, or we have to amend the permit in some instances. Last year we planted 1,994 trees on public land. Our target is 2,000. The target is not meant to come in till this financial year, but we really worked hard to try and get there last financial year. We missed out by 6. So if you know 6 spaces to find the other trees, please let us know. We also investing in aerial bundle cables. So if you don't know what that is, your typical power lines will be 4 wires running down the road. An aerial bundle cable puts all them into one big black bundle, and it means that the clearances you need to maintain around them for pruning are significantly reduced. So one of those that was done in the last financial year was in Carramar Avenue and in the Yongala Street, which I assume is probably somewhere around here, is being scheduled for this year coming up. And I'll finish here. And I suppose last time I was here a couple of years ago, I kind of like to leave with we need your help. There's things that you can do. If you've got space on your land, plant us a tree. We've got resources online to tell you what trees we think are appropriate, climate resilient, indigenous to the area, or have some kind of heritage connection to our community. If you don't have space and you've got a tree on your property, look after it. Get a qualified arborist to come and give you some advice, give it some water, give it some mulch. And if you see space on your neighbour's property, encourage them to plant a tree on their land. We really struggle to get trees on private land unless we've got some legal mechanism to do so. So if you can want to kind of put a little bit of pressure on your neighbours if they've got a big open lawn, we would really appreciate it. There's things you can do to advocate. We need better development outcomes. As Judy said, there's been recent changes to the planning scheme. They really affect how we can retain trees on private property. In fact, they kind of eliminate our ability to retain trees on private property in a lot of instances. We need more protection for trees, more broad controls, and we need greater penalties. So these are things you can do. You can advocate through lighter footprints, through your own email to your local state member, to one of your councillors. The more we hear that you want this, the more we can do to try and get these changes. And then the last part is tell us what you see. We kind of rely on all your ears and eyes in the community to say, if there's a tree being removed, do you think it should be removed? Let us know. The one thing I was speaking to someone in the room earlier today, when we issue a permit for tree removal, we ask for a tree to be planted. That tree that's planted is protected until it's mature. It needs to be established to our satisfaction. So if you see it be removed, if you see it poorly maintained, if you see it die, tell us and we can follow it up. And the same on like multi-unit development sites. If you ever walk through a multi-unit development site where there's more than one house on the block, typically we'll ask for one tree in the front setback. Often they'll be there. We have our landscape compliance officer that will go and check on that after it's the development's completed. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, is it still there? If you notice it gone, let us know and we can get it back in there. Last off, we are looking at bringing in some new tree controls. We'll be going out to public consultation, hopefully maybe next week or the week after. You'll notice that map that Judy had before where you saw White House with the big green space with planning controls more broadly. Boroondara is looking at trying to implement them. So we'll be going out to community consultation to gather your feedback. Are we asking for enough? Do we need to protect more? So let us know how you feel about that. And that's me done.
It's great to hear of your wins, Chris, and your new team members and the work they're doing. I requested some street trees the other day and I had 8 new street trees planted just last week in my little tiny street in Hawthorne. It was so exciting. Everyone was talking about it. It was a real buzz. What's that? Oh, could you ask him to go outside? Ask him to go outside, please. What a challenging job you have, Chris, getting across all that and also dealing with people as you do, but you do it really well, and it's a very important job that you've got. Our final speaker tonight is Amy Shaw. Amy is the coordinator of Urban Biodiversity and Revegetation at the City of Boroondara. Amy's been an environmental educator, worked for the Environment Protection Authority of Victoria and completed a PhD focused on people's connections with nature. She's worked at the City of Boroondara for around 6.5 years now as Sustainability Officer in the biodiversity space and also as a Climate Action Plan Lead. Wow, big job. Before taking on her current role in May last year, please welcome Amy Shaw.
Thanks so much for the introduction. All right, I'll just skip that little slide there. So yes, I'm here to talk to you tonight about our urban biodiversity strategy that was endorsed last September. I'll first have a little bit of a rundown of what our current biodiversity situation is in Boroondara. So we currently have 525 different species of Indigenous flora and fauna. So the breakdown is about, I think it's 240 animal species and about 280 plant species. And then we have our biodiversity sites that we manage in our biodiversity team. So the sites that we manage equate to about 62 hectares of land managed for biodiversity currently. And those sites are situated across the municipality, but in general, they tend to sort of be more focused around our biodiversity corridors, which are mapped out. So we have our main corridor, which is the Yarra River corridor, and then we have the Coonung Creek corridor and Gardeners Creek corridors. Then we also have a series of other corridors through the middle, so the Anniversary Trail corridor, and other creek corridors such as the Back Creek corridor. So wildlife, as you can imagine, tends to gravitate towards creeks or rivers So that's where we find our most rich biodiversity sites in Boroondara. But we still do have some more pockets of biodiversity throughout the centre of the municipality along the Anniversary Trail, which we are trying to preserve. We want to create a really well-connected municipality for wildlife and our flora to be able to disperse as well their seeds. So the strategy, which I mentioned before, was endorsed in September last year, identifies a range of challenges that we have with urban biodiversity. I'm sure you're all aware of these challenges. What my fellow speakers were talking about tonight, development and private land use, really big issues for biodiversity. Other issues, climate change, which has been touched on, really important for us to focus on, and it's throughout the strategy it's touched on. Other issues such as pest animals, native pests as well, for example, the noisy miners and the impacts on smaller birds. Issues, light pollution has an impact on our wildlife and also flora. Domestic animals, which was touched on. I think someone mentioned there was a cat curfew petition somewhere. So there's a range of challenges that we're facing with urban biodiversity, and our team's really committed through our strategy to try and address these challenges and get better outcomes for our wildlife throughout Boroondara. So in our strategy, we have two key targets. The first is to increase the area managed for biodiversity by 1 hectare a year, and the second is around having our residents and schools planting basically Indigenous plants, native plants, 5,000 per year. So our increase in our land managed for biodiversity, in the strategy we have maps of all of our biodiversity sites, and on those maps we've got them zoned out if it's a current section of that site being managed for biodiversity, and then we identify other areas that are mapped out as a future potential area that we could expand into. And then there's another section in the document which sort of has a 10-year outline of what we're going to do. So in year one, these are the sites we're going to increase our biodiversity on, that the land that we're managing. This zone on this site and this zone on that site, and then year 2, and so on through year 10. That plan, obviously it's quite hard to forecast out 10 years out what site's going to be best to work on. So there's a disclaimer in there saying that we can modify these sites if we find there's a different zone that comes up that we feel we should take that one and this one should move to there. So it's not a set in stone guide, but it helps us to plan what we're going to do to improve and increase our biodiversity. And that we do say in the strategy, if we can exceed that target, we will exceed that target. We always want to do more. We don't want to just limit ourselves and go, oh, well, we did 1 hectare a year. We're not going to bother with that section, even though we can. We'll do whatever we can. And with the planting of the 5,000 plants, as you can imagine, it's pretty hard to go and check if every one of those school kids went and planted that, and if in a year's time or 2 years' time it's survived, or if they didn't survive. So we really take this as how much we're providing out to the community. And last year we were just a couple of hundred off that target. So the strategy is broken up into 4 sections, I guess, so 4 strategic objectives the strategy focuses on. The first one is that we'll protect and enhance biodiversity on public land. So this is council-controlled land. This is what our tech officers really getting their hands dirty, getting out there on our biodiversity sites. We're improving the structure for our wildlife. So canopy cover, super important, trees, super important, but we're also focusing on the mid-story and the understory, getting that structure right for a range of different wildlife species that we want to see in Boroondara. Our second objective is focused around the community and getting the community involved and passionate about wildlife and biodiversity and native plants and animals. As the other speakers were touching on, the perception of the public, not in my backyard, I don't want that tree in my yard, I don't want that here. We want to change people's hearts and minds so that people want to live in a biodiverse city and see the benefits of that and take pleasure in having that in their own backyard. The third objective we have is around reducing land use development impacts on biodiversity. So as the other speakers were talking about, big issue, getting trees and biodiversity on land with development happening, but also private land, so land that we don't control, for example, on golf courses or schools that we don't have any control over. And the fourth one is to ensure that we're basically doing everything we can to make our decisions based on the right advice, the most up-to-date information, and so that we're not just putting in a plant for no reason. We have a scientific basis as to why this species is appropriate for here and what we're doing to ensure we're improving the biodiversity. So now I'm just going to draw down from those objectives and give you an example of an action that sort of sits under each objective that we've been working on. So they're the four. So in the first objective of improving biodiversity on public land, we've got our nature strip guidelines. In the objective around community engagement, I'll talk about education initiatives. In the objective around private land, I'm going to talk about something at a golf course that's been going on at a private golf course. And then in the up-to-date information, I'll talk about monitoring. So under the first objective, as I mentioned before, we've got our tech officers on the ground really getting out there and improving the structure of our biodiversity sites with the mid-story and understory, and expanding it through our biodiversity sites plans, getting increased areas for biodiversity in that 1 hectare a year. But we also identified that streetscapes are really important for biodiversity, and we don't want to just be focusing on just our little reserves that we have in our parks or along the creek lines. The nature strips are such an untapped resource in general. Most people is just mown lawn, if you've noticed. However, nature strips can be so amazing for our pollinators in particular. So council, you may already be aware, does already have nature strip guidelines, but the process for getting a permit can take a little while. There's a bit involved in it, and it's not really prioritised or incentivised or promoted that well within council. So one of our actions was to update these nature strip guidelines. So they've been updated, they've been out to community consultation, and shortly they'll be going back to council for endorsement. So the main thing that's happening with these guidelines is we're taking them online. So we're going to have them automated so that people can have the guidelines, go online, click through, yes, I agree that I'll plant to this height, and I agree that I won't have boulders that will be tripping hazards, those types of things. Once they click that, they'll get the permit, automated email to them, here's your permit, please proceed. And people who are getting permits, we're going to have promotion of this so that people can get incentives such as plant vouchers, so that we really encourage people to give this a go. Oh, I'll have to speed up. Education. So we run quite a few different education programs to try and get the community to love nature. We have our Backyard Biodiversity Project, which runs like a short course in creating a wildlife garden. So people come and they get a few different workshops, plus they get a visit from a landscape designer who'll come to their home, look at their garden, give them advice, a list of plants they could plant, a little mud map of what they should do. Then they get to come to the Indigenous Nursery, the Victorian Indigenous Nursery Cooperative, which is in Fairfield, and pick up some free plants. It's a great program. We also run a lot of citizen science programs. There's a picture of a moth from a moth night that we run annually, and we have bird walks and lots of different activities. Crest gliders. People may be thinking, what's a crest glider? It's actually a sugar glider. So sugar gliders a few years back were actually reclassified as 3 different species. And so the crest glider is actually the one in Victoria. So think sugar glider. So this photo is not from Kew Golf Course. It's from actually, I think this one's maybe Yarra Flats Reserve, I think. But we've worked with Kew Golf Club, a private golf club, to put log hollows for crest gliders on their course, which hopefully when we go back and check them, hopefully they'll have moved in like they have in our other areas where we've put these hollows. And then monitoring of biodiversity sites under the fourth objective. So the data is not important here at all. It's just a bit of a prompt for me. So we have traditionally, I guess, there's not been a great focus on monitoring our biodiversity sites and what's there over time. So I'm really keen for us to be looking back in time, what used to be there, and plotting it across, 20 years or so. Well, that's 1960, so there's a bit of gaps in data. But so we can see what's there now, continue to monitor it through citizen science and our own officers, tech officers, being really in tune with their sites and doing monitoring. So we can see what's there, what's changing over time, so we don't wake up in 20 or 30, 40 years and find that those 240 odd animal species we had in Boroondara have dwindled to 100. We want to see if there's anything happening and there's a drop-off in something so we can make plans to improve the situation on that site. Is it a vegetation structure issue? Is it a connectivity issue? Is it a predator issue? And make adjustments. And I'll leave on this slide. So how can you help? You could join the Backyard Biodiversity Program. It's run every year. Love to see you there. And create your own garden home. You can plant out your nature strip. I encourage you to wait for the automated permit to come through. So it'll make it easier and you'll get some free plants and you could do that. You can join some of our citizens and science events, come to a moth night, a bird walk. We've been doing some flying fox walks as well, so you can come along to those types of things. Or you can join a friends group. So we've got some amazing friends group in Boroondara who are doing really great things. So you could talk to Graham up the back about friends groups. So yeah, get involved. And we'd love to see you at some events. So there's Living for Our Future e-news, which you can join, which is on our website. But if anyone wants directly email to them, let me know. Thank you.
I'm wondering if we can pass these around like this. Does this still work? Okay, be a bit quicker. Thanks so much, Amy. What an amazing space you're working with all those cute animals like gliders. And it's great to hear about the biodiversity sites in Boroondara, and if you want to join a friends group or find out what Ball and North are doing with nature strips, we've got them here tonight. So that's a great opportunity. So that brings us to the end of our presentations, and I'm now going to ask Sarah to come out the front, also with Lizzie, because they've been checking your questions. There's the Slido number again, but you'll be at the bottom of the Q&A probably. So we've got Izzy and Sarah who are going to be taking in turns. I'd like to invite our four speakers to come out as well. We're going to be playing a game of pass the microphone, so please bear with us. We only have one working microphone. We did have two, but the other one decided to die yesterday. And I'll ask our four presenters to resist the temptation to give long answers, because then we've got more questions in for the night. So I'm going to hand over to Izzy, and then, who's going first? So you've got two microphones. Okay? You've got this little one, and you have to hand both of them to the presenter who answers the questions.
First question, fines for illegal tree removal are too low to deter developers. What level of government can set fines based on tree age / size / value, and what are LGAs doing about it?
So in terms of fines, the state government sets the fine. It sets there's a penalty unit, so each penalty unit is worth about $200 at the moment. In this one, and the maximum fine under law is 20 penalty units. So it's about $4,000. Under a planning scheme, the maximum fine is almost $200,000 that can be issued at court. But yeah, if you want to see the fines increased or the penalty units, the amount of penalty units that can be applied increased, state government is the person to, or the people to talk to.
So the shot hole borer has arrived in Perth. What plans do Boroondara and the state government have to manage it should it arrive here? Do you want me to repeat the question?
The question was whether the shot hole borer that's in Perth, what plans have been made for here in Victoria. And you know the answer to that, don't you? Absolutely nothing. They're relying on good luck. And in case you didn't know it, 2 weeks ago, the state government in Western Australia changed its policy in relation to the emerald shot hole borer from elimination to control. So they were trying to eradicate. They put a lot of money in, it didn't work, and now they've gone back for control. So it's almost inevitable that at some stage it will arrive. And all I can say is keep an eye on Adelaide.
Next question. How great a threat to Boroondara's tree canopy and biodiversity is the proposed activity centres for Camberwell Junction, could apply just to the other ones at Hawthorn and Glenferrie as well, and has it been quantified?
So did everyone hear the question? Yep. No, it's in summary, it's what kind of impacts will the activity centres that have been allowed by the government have on tree canopy cover, and have we quantified it? The answer is we haven't quantified it. Look, in terms of the activity centres, there's very dense urban areas that won't have many trees at the moment, so there won't be much in terms of loss, but we won't get many trees back in those spaces. But those activity centres stretch out, as far as I'm aware, into more residential kind of spaces, and so in those areas there can be impacts.
In general, the answer to that question, regardless of where those activity hubs are going to be, is you're going to have much denser housing, far less vegetation, obviously, and the impacts are in terms of the ratio of developed to green space is not going to change, so that even if you have a new site, the ratio of developed to green space will remain the same despite a much higher population. So the way this is going, the state government is going to be passing off major costs to local government in terms of the future use of existing infrastructure, green infrastructure. It doesn't seem to have been thought through. And the health and developmental benefits that accrue from green space are not being considered at all in this. And you shouldn't be caught off guard by this, because when we were here 3 years ago, there was a proposal for the 5 developmental strategies. Okay, the one that they adopted was obvious; it was going to be the dense on the current footprint. So all of this was predictable, and in that particular proposal document, there was no mention of trees at all in the complete document. Not one mention of it, and the only mention of green space was on page, I think it was 76 out of about 110. It was one paragraph, and it basically said there'd be no increased ratio of green space. So that's where we're at.
Some interference because the mics are too close together.
Okay, cool. I'll hold it there.
Yeah.
Yep. Is that okay? Okay, can you hear me a bit better? Yeah? Okay. So Chris, you kind of touched on this a bit in your presentation, but I suppose maybe elaborate a little bit more on what's involved. But does council do follow-up inspections to ensure that the requirement to replace trees is complied with?
So the answer is yes. Under our tree canopy strategy, we got funding for a new position, which is our landscape compliance officer for tree planting. So anytime a tree is planted as a condition of a permit, we follow up on it. We ask for other evidence, and our landscape compliance officer will go and check on it. And for any multi-unit development, we go and check on that at what we call the statement of compliance stage. So once the building's developed, completed, and it's about to be handed over to the new owners, we go out and have a look at it and make sure that we're satisfied, because everything in the planning permit is usually to council satisfaction or the satisfaction of the responsible authority, and we make sure that it's been planted in accordance with the endorsed plans.
A Raillight survey reported Boroondara leads Australia with 684 knockdowns in 12 months. How much do these knockdowns reduce tree canopy? Is it measured?
Look, it's not measured. We don't, I suppose we can measure it. We're intending to measure it through our canopy cover assessments. In terms of how much canopy loss is on those sites, it really ranges. I think, very smart developers will pick land that doesn't have particularly big trees on them, or very small, or any trees at all. Other developers will often pick land where they remove or make wanton decisions to avoid the law. And other times we have, under our local law, we do get very challenged with being able to retain trees on private land when there's development occurring, and that's why we're looking at bringing in new controls.
I'm going to pass this on to Judy in a second, but overall, when they look at development on private land, it doesn't matter whether it's in Australia or Europe or in North America, you lose about 1% of your canopy, 1 to 1.5% of your canopy per annum on private land. So that's not a Boroondara figure, but you'll be well within that or over that, as the case may be, just depending on how many development things are taking place.
And to add to the previous two, in preparing for tonight's talk, I had a look at the Boroondara Urban Forest Strategy and the very interesting maps that are included of canopy cover change. And I noticed that the street that I grew up in Boroondara, was marked orange as having, the second highest level of canopy cover change, just the street. And so I went on to NearMap, which is this high resolution aerial photography, and also has time sequence photos. And in 2009, there was the house I lived in with most of the backyard that I'd grown up in, including the cricket pitch and so on. And then in 2025, there was basically no backyard left whatsoever. There was a new swimming pool, and the rest of the garden was gone. And it was the same story for the house next door and the house next door and the house next door. And it wasn't just the backyards, it was also the front yards. So what that said to me is it's not just development processes, because those houses were retained houses. That wasn't a knockdown situation. That was people, doing stuff in their existing houses. So I really love the idea that Chris talked about of talking to your neighbours about planting a tree and, starting to shift the conversation to, we all need a swimming pool, to actually, we all need a tree.
Just to add to the data, I did some work in Stonington a while back, and Stonington, it's still a green and leafy suburb, except if you go down the lanes. If you go down the laneways at the back of the homes, all of the trees that used to be in the backyard are gone. And we went for several blocks along those back lanes, and from the front everything looks green and wonderful, but there's nothing in the backyards anymore. And the other one that you might be interested in, I think it was 3 years ago, I attended a forum at Eltham, and the Friends of Eltham out there were talking about looking at 278 development proposals on private blocks at that time, and every one of them involved the removal of every tree.
Is there any studies or information on what impact not having a cat curfew is having on the biodiversity in Boroondara?
No, there's no studies that I'm aware of. So the domestic animal management plan is currently being reviewed by in our local laws team at the moment, and the biodiversity team is working with them and putting forward the research that we do have on cat curfews in other areas and the impacts of cats, feral cats, and also obviously domestic cats. But a specific study on the impact in Boroondara, we don't have that data.
Tree prosecutions in Boroondara increased steadily from 3 in 2021 to 40 in 2024. What's behind this startling increase in tree prosecutions?
A very concerted effort from my team, and the resources that we have, we can invest more time in it takes a long time to do an investigation when you're taking someone to court. It's a long process to go through the courts, but we have more resources to do that. And also, we talked about the fine before being $4,000 under our local law. It's grossly inadequate as a disincentive. Sometimes we get situations where $4,000 is a significant penalty to a landowner, but we have plenty of sites where that isn't. That is just a cost of doing business. And in those circumstances, the only way we can see to disincentivize the offending is to take people to court. At court, they can only still get that maximum fine of $4,000, but they can be convicted. So it can either be a guilty with conviction or a guilty without conviction. Most of the time it's guilty, no conviction. We strive for that conviction because that really does have a lot of weight for people travelling, people owning businesses, people being directors. And that sometimes is the big stick we're trying to kind of throw around. We publicise our prosecutions on the website. We do anywhere from 20 to 30 or 40 a year. So have a look.
How do we get other members of our community, other than in this room, passionate about protecting our trees?
I'll take it because I got the short straw. Look, I think what many people find with trees is they are really, really ignorant. They just don't realise the benefits they're getting. And one of the things that I find is that people actually don't believe that the benefits you're getting are as great as we claim. So to give you an example, I said in passing that people live longer in green and leafy suburbs. Data in that's incontrovertible. You may remember that during COVID lockdowns, there were certain parts of Melbourne where people ignored the rules. Do you remember the government getting very sort of uppity about it until it was pointed out that most of the non-compliance with those lockdowns was in areas where there was no green space or trees, which is entirely predictable. If you look at children's development through their early childhood and then to schools, much better in terms of green development if they've got green and leafy development. I'll just finish on one other. They did a little study on the effect of being out in a natural environment on kids' gut health and on their skin health. Okay, and they found that the kids that went out into a bit of local bush had a much healthier gut flora and had far fewer problems with skin ailments than kids that didn't. So then they thought, what would happen if we just brought some mulch in and put it around the trees that we've already got in the garden? And they had much better gut health. And then they thought, what happens if we've got no trees? Because the state government knocked down lots of trees after Black Saturday. There's not many schools anymore. That's another issue. But the Schools Building Authority, if you've got somewhere you want to kick, have a crack at them. They're absolute rogues. They knock trees down. They don't listen to government at local law at all. Anyway, they've got no trees. So they put the mulch in a 1 metre by 1 metre sort of raised table to see if that had an improvement on the kids' health. And it did. Now, we don't do any of that because none of the people in government, particularly state government, actually believe that you get those sorts of benefits from vegetation. And as long as the buggers don't believe it, you've got no hope of changing their attitude.
Okay, you guys can sit down now.
You guys just need to stay there for another minute. That's all the questions we have time for tonight. But our speakers have agreed to stay on for another 15 or 20 minutes. So if your question didn't get asked, no problem. You can come up and ask it to them in person. We've learned so much tonight in a short space of time. So if your brain's like anything like mine, it's a bit overloaded, but that's better than being that way. It's up to us, isn't it, to work with people like Chris and Amy to do our best in Boroondara to protect nature and help make Boroondara better habitat, not just for us, but for the animals that we share Boroondara with. As a token of our appreciation to our speakers who have given up their time tonight, we have a little gift for each of them. Come out, please, and give them to them. Please join me in thanking our 4 presenters. There's a lovely little card inside there, and Sarah has done the artwork on that. On behalf of the Forest Working Group, thank you for attending. New members are always welcome. I'll now hand over to Lighter Footprints convener Jenny Smithers, who will tell us what's coming up next. Thank you.
Got to hold both of these. Can you do that? You guys can sit down now.
Hey Ray, can you be my prop person?
Sure.
Don't be afraid, it's not a lump of coal. Do you want to hold it up, Ray? What is it? This one? No, do be afraid of this. Have a look, it is fearsome. What is it, Ray?
The Australian.
What does it say on the front page?
Knives out for net zero.
Wow, who's afraid of net zero? Barnaby. Anyway, we've had a lot of talk about the age, and Lighter Footprints is non-partisan, so I thought I'd better slip in the Australian. Okay, here's something you should be really afraid of. Ray, come back. You can't nick off. What is it, Ray?
Oh no, not the Climate Council.
It's the pesky Climate Council.
The stronger target, safer future.
Okay, who knows when this report was released? Today. This report, all of you must go home tonight, before you go to bed, after you've had the trees, download and start to read, and it will make you feel absolutely shit. This is shit news, which we've known was coming for 20 years. How long has Lighter Footprints been going for, Carolyn? Nearly 20 years. And basically, this is a question for Carolyn. What should our target for carbon emissions should have been 20 years ago? It should have been real zero. What should our target be now? It should be real zero. What's the government that's got the great big mandate going to do? It's going to do something wimpy, absolutely wimpy. Okay, people, I want you to listen to this. You've heard about 330 and 300. There's another number you need. 80%. We want this, our 2035 target to be 80%. Say it after me, everyone. 80%. Own it. 80%. Don't be shy, right? Okay, so watch what those wimpy politicians do, and we will not settle for anything less than 80%. Right. I know we're meant to be polite in Boroondara, but I'm not going to be polite when you have to read this shit report, which our children should not have to put up with. Okay, now I'm going to get back to being nice. Thank you, Ray.
There's an incorrect date here.
I know. Very good proofreading. Okay, come back. Not so fast. Okay, have a look on your seats. Who noticed you had 2 bits of paper? Okay, can you all hold up this one. Hold it up. Don't be scared. That's not so scary. This is good news. This is all about Lighter Footprints' next event, which is the battery event. Right. So if you haven't been to our last sellout battery event, come to this one in, when is it? August. Anyway, come to that one. But if you can't come, or you've already got your battery, I want you to do something very daring. I want you to give it to a friend and encourage them to come, okay? And make them feel really good about coming, because we are not going to get on top of things unless we grow our climate community. And this is a very friendly event, and I'll be very nice. So, but if you really haven't got any friends or pals, what I want you to do is to sneak down your street and have a look and see which blooming eco-conscious person's got solar panels on their roof, and in the dead of the night, slip it in their letterbox. Or, the other thing, at the back table, we've got lots more bundles, and what do Lighter Footprints people do? They are letterboxes, so look down there, grab a bundle, and it's Kew this time, lovely Kew, lots of trees. And I want you to start doing your letterboxing about August, beginning of August. All right. Now, when you're feeling really shitty about the world, there are some good things you can do. What you do is you join a friends group. Put up your hand up the back for the mighty friends groups. Where are you? There they are. I can tell you, if you join a friends group and don't put your hands in the soil, you feel a lot better about the world, and you talk to all these other lovely people who all feel very grumpy and have to go along and do earth therapy, and they've all got less skin problems. Anyway, so support and join friends groups. The other thing you can do is you can be like me, you can be a serial pest. How am I a serial pest? Well, I like to know, I like to send in notification to the Boroondara Council that there's a missing tree outside number 22 Smith Street. My grandma used to do this in Castlemaine. She used to walk around watering the street trees. She was nuts. I don't know where I got it from. Anyway, all of you can do this. All of you, you've got to join me. Every time you see a missing street tree, jump on your phone and let the council know so that our mighty Chris and Tim can get a tree. And hey, who knows what colour the posts for this year's trees have got? Here's a question. Who's been really looking? Anyone? Blue? Ah, Councillor Nolan, you. Oh, that's good. Chris, is he right? He is. Right, so there's a clue. You know it's a new tree if it's got blue tips on its pole. And you can feel really good about the work. Okay, so what else was I going to say? Yeah, I think you should. See, I need a helper. Keep going. Oh, that's a bench event. We've talked about that. You're all coming or you bring a friend. Okay, right, we're going to be nice again. Come to our film afternoon at Kew Library. You need to know about Scott Reef. Who knows where Scott Reef is? Yep, up, tucked away in Northwest Australia. Most of the country doesn't know about it. Scott Reef's going to be completely off blip if our rotten fossil fuel companies get a chance. So come and see a lovely film about Scott Reef, and also come and be amazed at the mighty fearless people that go out on those tiny little watercraft to the great big coal ships. And I reckon maybe we had people in this room who've done that. I'm not that crazy. I'll hug trees, but I won't do that. Anyway, yeah, another slide. Okay. Lighter Footprints needs to grow. You guys are all on side, right? You all know about the climate crisis. Lighter Footprints needs to be communicating with the rest of the community. So we want to talk to everybody who is involved in sport. So we need your help. We're having a sports event, and we want to really engage with all of the community sport in Boroondara. So pop your thinking caps on, and if you can help us connect with those people and get them along, that would be great. Because we're not going to get on top of this climate shit unless we really bring the whole community along. Okay, any slides? I think we're done. Oh, yeah, no, I've talked about that. You're going to do that. And we need more worker bees. So please come and join us. Join Ray's Fabulous Forest Group, or and go and see Sarah at the back. There we go. And thanks for your patience. 2 new councillors.
And the mayor.
And the mayor. Mayoress or mayor? No. Thanks for coming, councillors. And look, who knew that Boroondara was the bright spot in the world? But it is. So, thanks so much. Look, thank you all very much for your attention in coming, and let's keep up the good fight. Bye.